Good morning, everyone. My name is Eric Toensmeier, and I have been enthusiastic about perennial vegetables for a long time, and I had the great pleasure to collaborate on some projects, which I'll talk about a little bit with Ava and Nevi and Rebecca and some other folks. Actually, and Tycho and Christina, who you just saw, along with some folks here on a project related to nutrition and perennial vegetables. And so we'll walk through a couple of different efforts I've done on the nutrition of perennial vegetables over the last 6 or 7 or 8 years. It's quite exciting. Many of them are very nutritious and really have a lot to offer. So I will share my screen and show some slides. And just stop me if there are questions or thoughts. I only have 10 slides. I'll go through them kind of slow, and we'll have but please let me know if there are any clarifications or questions as we go. Oops, go back. Here we go. It's so nice to not have to start with what's a perennial vegetable. That has already been covered. That's great. I'll just go through the 3 publications we did first, and then I'll talk about what we learned. So in 2020, with 2 colleagues, I published a paper, a scientific paper that looked at the world's perennial vegetables. We wanted to know how many cultivated species there are, which was over 600 around the world. We wanted to know their potential to sequester carbon and mitigate climate change. And we wanted to know about their nutrition. In particular, we wanted to know what is their power to address the deficiencies in nutrients, the nutrients that are missing in the diets of people around the world, and we'll talk about that a little bit. So, somehow I went to visit it is a free download. It's a paper you can download for free, but I noticed that one of the attachments, the one that actually has the nutrition data, was not the correct one on their website. So I put on my Patreon page, but for free for everyone, the full spreadsheet. So if you'd like to go and see the nutrition data and play around with the numbers and analyze things, that is available for you there. It was a lot of fun to do, and I think it was sort of as far as I can tell, the first big peer-reviewed science paper to take a big global look at perennial vegetables. So it was quite a treat, and it was really fun to work on and very, very interesting. And a couple of other things emerged from that. One of which was my work, our international project. One of the things we learned when we were looking at the nutrition of these vegetables is, for the great majority of perennial vegetables, there is no nutrition information published, or where there is, it might do 1 or 2 or 3 nutrients, but certainly not the full 9 that we were interested in for this particular paper. So we set out to do some original research and directly ourselves test the nutrition of, or work with laboratories to test the nutrition of perennial vegetables that people were excited about. So the project was based in Sweden and Denmark, and in the northeastern part of the United States, in Vermont and Maine, which are actually colder than most of Scandinavia, most of the inhabited parts of Scandinavia. So there was a good climate comparison, I think, there. for various reasons, we published it ourselves. We would have needed to do a lot more studies to peer review. We learned once we had finished it, but that's also a free download. I'm really happy with how that came out, and it was really fun to have this international collaboration between people in cold climates working on perennial vegetables. That was really, really a treat. It was really fun. And the other publication that came out of that first paper, we learned as we were working on it that trees with edible leaves are the most nutritious category of all vegetables in the world. Not every tree with edible leaves, but as a category, trees with edible leaves are the most nutritious type of vegetables, including all the annual vegetables and everything. So we do have this now. It's a free download. I got paid to write it. It's a free download, and we have English and Spanish already published, and the French will be ready next week. So we're very close to that. And Czech is being worked on, and so Czech should be ready in the next couple of months as well. So it's been very exciting. And if anybody, oh, I have a typo in there. Sorry about that. If anyone is interested in translating it into Swedish or any other language, I would be very happy to work closely with you to do that. It was really fun. It's a fun publication, and it's fun to work on the translations for it. So those are kind of the three pieces, that all of which are free and downloadable online. That sort of bring us up to where we are at the present. I should also mention that a fantastic resource for nutrition and vegetables is the World Vegetable Center, but they're really primarily focused on tropical vegetables, so that's not likely to be super helpful in Scandinavia. So we were looking at really two different categories of deficiencies or diet nutrients missing in people's diets that are needed for health. And this comes from the work of an organization called Leaf for Life, who've published some really excellent books on leaf vegetables. The first is traditional malnutrition, which is what you see in my experience, what I've seen in places like Guatemala in Central America. You see this in lots of African countries as well, where which does come in part from a lack of enough vegetables. This is if you need more iron, zinc, vitamin A, and folate. Iodine is also in that category, but we can't really get iodine from vegetables unless we fertilize them with it first. So that seems like it's not really going to come from vegetables. And there are a number of very serious challenges that can come from the lack of those nutrients, and around 2 billion people in the world suffer from those deficiencies. So that's a very serious group. But there is also another set of deficiencies from people eating the industrial diet, like folks do here in my home country of the United States, or I suspect in Sweden as well, where people are not eating enough vegetables. So this is the lack of fiber, calcium, magnesium, and antioxidants, which in this case, the ones for which the most data is available are vitamins A, C, and E. And there are hundreds of millions, if not billions, of people who have these set of deficiencies as well. And even in let's say countries like Guatemala, where I have family, people in the rural areas and poor people in the cities have traditional malnutrition. But as people become wealthier and their diet changes and they eat more at McDonald's, they start to shift to this other kind of deficiency. So we wanted to analyze the world's vegetables, and its perennial vegetables in particular, for its ability to meet these needs. So as far as Sweden is concerned, we're looking at these industrial diet deficiencies. And I should add that if humanity was to grow enough fruits and vegetables to meet these needs, we would have to triple the amount of land in vegetables. So we only grow a third as many fruits and vegetables as we need to provide these missing nutrients to humanity, whereas we grow way more starch and fat than humanity needs. In fact, enough that it is unhealthy that we eat that much of it. So one of the ways, really what we did is we took the vegetables which are most commonly sold in grocery stores and markets around the world, broccoli and tomatoes and string beans and all these kinds of common vegetables, lettuce, kale, and we analyzed their levels of these nutrients. And any vegetable which had a higher level of those nutrients than any of the common vegetables that are sold in stores, we called super abundant, meaning it has a higher level than any of the common vegetables. And quite a few perennial, and we if it has from more than what those vegetables have to twice as much, we called that very high. And if it had more than twice as much, we called it extremely high. And the number of the vegetables, of the perennial vegetables, were extremely high. There are a few annual vegetables that are also really outstanding in terms of nutrition. The one that stands out the most is amaranth greens are really, really spectacular. Excuse me. And also the various parts of cowpeas, which probably it's a little bit too chilly there in the summer for those. So here I have the key nutrients for industrial diets, the people with industrial diets need to eat more of, and I've listed all the perennial vegetables in the top row here. Oops, sorry. I thought I could draw a circle around that. Let's see, here we go. In this top row up here, thank you, I really don't need that, are all of these have more than twice the highest level found in the vegetables sold in markets around the world. So you can see there are definitely perennial vegetables that are extremely high in those nutrients, and quite a few of those are woody plants. We have grapes, we have a number of Siberian ginseng species there, mulberry leaf, edible leaf goji, Chinese tune. That's quite a few woody plants in that category. And then below that, we have the very high, which are higher than those of the reference vegetables, the commonly sold vegetables, but not twice as high. And there are many, many, many perennial vegetables in those categories. So, oh dear, no, I think I remember how to get rid of these, but I forgot.
Eric, we have a question from the audience.
Great, wonderful.
Just I follow. Is, for example, there you have Vitis vinifera or the electrocorticals. Is that the leaves of the plant that you're talking about?
That is the leaves. Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
one more thing, we don't really see the text here on the big screen in the room. So if you give us some examples, we don't see the text.
Next, I do have slides with those examples coming up next. The idea here is not really to read and appreciate them, just to see there are a lot of them. And now, and then in a moment, we will go through and discuss those most nutritious species for where you live. And can I get rid of these? I forget how to get rid of these little drawings here. So that might, eraser, there we go. Erase all ink on slide. And it doesn't want to do that. Well, we'll continue with them. So the other piece is we wanted to know which species have very high levels of more than one nutrient that is needed to address these deficiencies, to meet the needs of what we're missing in our diets. And the group of all the plants that did the best job, that was most likely to have those multiple levels, we call them multi-nutrient species, was trees with edible leaves. Trees and shrubs with edible leaves are, as a category, the most nutritious. So here are some of your most nutritious trees with edible leaves. Saltbush, which would really be more, I think, of a Denmark and southern coast kind of species, or tree purslane, I think they call it in England. We have two different species of Eleutherococcus, and there's another which I suspect is just as good, Eleutherococcus sieboldii, which I grow here and I quite like. These are members of the ginseng family, the Aralia family, or the ivy family. And they have a pretty strong flavor, but they're not bad when you cook them. And they are really just spectacular at meeting those needs that we have so much. And they're very hardy to cold. Some of them are from Siberia, so I feel like they would do well even in northern Scandinavia. And the one that I grow here, I'm very pleased with the flavor of sieboldii. And I look forward to doing some nutrient testing on that one at some point, because I wasn't able to find a whole lot. They also can handle quite a bit of shade, which is fantastic. So a shade tolerant, extremely cold hardy perennial vegetable is a very good thing. And they are grown as vegetables in Asia. Then Lycium chinense, that's the edible leaf types of goji. So it's in the tomato family, and I think it's quite delicious. It's a different species from the goji, which is grown for fruit. This one is primarily grown for the leaves, and I very much like them. It makes a great hedge. That seems to want full sun. The saltbush also really wants full sun. The next one here is edible leaf types of mulberry. So what I found about mulberries is that, as far as I can tell, none of them are poisonous, but some of them taste bad, and some of them have a very fibrous texture. So it's a matter of sampling the varieties around you to see which have a good texture and a good flavor. And all of these, I should say, are typically managed by coppicing, by cutting them back and allowing them to resprout. So you get the advantage there is they have a long season of tender growth, and they're at a height that you can harvest them easily. Oh my gosh, and where is it? I've been slowly translating my way through this Swedish book right here, which is such a wonderful guide to that kind of pruning practice. I don't know if you can see that over there, but many of us around the world are looking to Swedish pruning traditions. Many of us, maybe that's an exaggeration, but certainly it's a very great inspiration to me. Then we have Tuna sinensis, which is the most nutritious leaf in the world by these criteria that we set out for this paper. And it tastes like chicken soup, which is pretty great. It's a flavor that takes some getting used to. I did have some chefs come from Noma in Denmark a number of years ago to try different foods in my garden, and they thought that was the most interesting one for them. It has umami flavor. And I have come to love it so much. I have 12 planted here, and I just got 4 new plants yesterday of a pink leafed variety that I'm very excited about. So that one is great. And even where it is, mine survive here. They've taken 23 below 0 Celsius. So they can handle a lot of cold. And if it's colder, they die to the ground and resprout, and that's okay because you're only eating the leaves anyway. And the last one is grape leaves, which are really, really spectacular. They're very high in vitamin A and vitamin E and fiber. I'm sure you all know all about growing grapes in your climate already. But it is not only for wrapping things, like stuffed grape leaves, but also for all kinds of other uses. They can be cooked. And mulberry leaves actually are also used to wrap things in the same way, of the larger varieties. Then we have some of the herbaceous species. I wonder if I can turn off annotation up here. Clear all drawings. There we go. Okay. So here we have the best herbaceous species for meeting the needs of people in industrial diets from what we have found so far. The first is milkweed, Asclepias syriaca, which I believe is an invasive species where you are. It's native here where I live. It also may have it has some compounds in it that are poisonous, but people have eaten it here for many thousands of years. And there's some work, you have to cook it. There's some work ongoing. What was really amazing to me about it is that it has 8 times more vitamin C than an orange by weight. That's pretty spectacular, and it is very delicious. I don't really recommend planting it where you are, I think, because it's such a weed. But if you already have it, you may as well take advantage of it. Then we have Turkish rocket, Buneus orientalis, which I think is also quite a weed there. I'm told by Stephen Barstow that in Norway it has become a weed, and yet Southeast Asian immigrants, he always sees them on the side of the road harvesting it because they love to eat it so much. So it is really a very, very nutritious vegetable. And our study was the first I've seen that really looked at its nutrition. The study we did with Ava and Evie and Rebecca and Tycho and Caroline, excuse me. Then we have Chenopodium bonus henricus, Good King Henry. I don't think it tastes very good personally, but it's very nutritious. We have fireweed, which I imagine is all over your landscape there. Quite impressive. Then Heblytzia tamnoides, which is, do you say Kionospinati? Maybe that's Norwegian for that one, which I know is certainly grown as a vegetable in Scandinavia. I think it's one of the very best tasting perennial vegetables that exists. I think they're just wonderful and very nutritious, so that was great. Silene vulgaris, which we call bladder campion, again, fantastic. And nettles, of course, very, very highly nutritious. So it's not that you shouldn't grow other perennial vegetables. All of them are good for you. But these are let's see, this is 6, and the last one is also 6. Oh, 7. These are the 13 perennial vegetables that I think are that our analysis suggests are the most nutritious perennial vegetables that you could grow, and are quite a bit more nutritious than, say, cabbage or carrots or squash or any of the other vegetables that we grow. It doesn't mean they taste as good or produce as well. Some of them taste great and some of them produce very well. But not all of them do. But I feel like with so many perennial vegetables to choose from, and there are hundreds to choose from, even in very cold climates like ours, this is one way we can sort of start to think about what to choose from all that diversity. And again, I don't want to discourage anyone from growing any other perennial vegetables. I love the leaves of linden, for example, the Tilia cordata leaves I really love. They're not especially nutritious, but they're wonderful. I love the broccoli from sea kale very much. And I'm going to plant 100 of them here next year. I'm very serious about how much I love sea kale, but in terms of nutrition, these are really the standout species. So I just wanted to thank the many funders who helped to support these various projects. each of the components, each of these publications had its own set of funders, and in the case of our international collaboration, each of the sub pieces of that had their own funding as well. So it's very exciting as someone who's been interested in perennial vegetables for a long time to see we're finally able to get even very modest, very small amounts of money to support this work. I think of as a very exciting development. So I think with that, we can have some questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we can start with one ask questions from the chat. The leaves from Lithium chinensis, do they need to be cooked or do anything? And is the nutrition from the raw leaves or?
Sure. Well, we studied the nutrition in the raw leaves for all of these, just because that's what that was how we were able to compare them to what's done with the annual vegetables. That's sort of the standard practice. I like them raw, but usually they are cooked. And it's not just the leaves, but the whole shoot, maybe about the size of this pen when it's tender. You can eat the whole thing, the leaves and the tender shoot on that particular species. And I quite like them. I think they're very tasty, and you can cut them cut them back 2 times a year. It's more managed like a hedge, so you sort of eat the trimmings off of the hedge. I really like them a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you for a great little introduction. I just checked up one of the plants, this Asclepia, which is sidenört in Sweden, and here it's a super invasive plant instead. So you shouldn't put it in any garden. It's on the Naturvårdsverkets list where you should burn it and remove it and stuff. But it also says a lot about this poisonous aspects. I'm just curious. You needed to like prepare it or boil it, or what did you say when it comes to the edible aspect?
We usually just cook it for about 5 minutes, and it's interesting because it does have these poisonous components, and yet people have eaten it here for thousands of years. So we're sort of trying to, there are some studies trying to understand that better here. And I will say it is maybe the best tasting perennial vegetable of any of the ones that I grow. So I have mixed feelings about it. Obviously, as I said, we don't want you to plant that there. But because our study was really looking across the northern temperate, on both sides of the Atlantic, it is a very, very nutritious vegetable. I'm looking forward to finding out more about this poison. It has also been used to make gasoline. So
Well, we need to say the plant's name in Swedish.
Asclepia or sidenört.
Can I say something? I also checked it because I didn't know, and I also found that it was poisonous. But then I checked in one more place, and that it's poisonous for grazing animals.
I also saw this and the allergies.
Yeah, maybe then not for humans.
But in another place it seems to be poisonous for.
it's very poisonous when it's raw.
I think it's actually not allowed to sell or spread it. And if you have it on your ground, you are obliged to try to dig it up and get rid of it. But there is other Asclepias. How are they? Like the Incarnata or anything?
Incarnata was very beautiful, very, very beautiful. There are a few other edible species. Incarnata, I've heard different reports about, and I don't really want to try because of the toxicity in the genus. I only want to try ones that are really confirmed as having been eaten a lot. So tuberosa is also very beautiful, and people have eaten it at times, but I'm cautious. I'm cautious.
You had Vitis vinifera in the list of good. What are the specialities of that, or how good is it? What nutrients?
Let's see. It is particularly high in vitamin A and vitamin E and fiber. I had always only thought that people ate it wrapping like, you know, rice and lamb and stuff to eat. But Martin Crawford taught me that you can just use it in a stir fry or a soup or whatever you're cooking, as long as the leaves are young and tender. They can be full size, but they still need to be young. Most of these leaves, once they get older, they become very tough and not good to eat, which is why we cut them and allow them to resprout again and again. That keeps them more tender. And he even grows some grapes Martin grows some grapes only for leaves. So he just cuts them back every year and lets them, as we know, when you cut grapes, they resprout very well. I have always found I can get all the grape leaves I need just from harvesting a few from the grapes I grow for fruit.
We have a more question about this Lithium sinensis. Is there a special name sort of it, or because we are most common as you use the berries from it? So is it the same for the leaves, or?
Sure, it's tricky because there are two different types that are sometimes considered one species and sometimes considered two.
Okay.
So there's Lycium barbarum, which is the one mostly grown for fruit, and Lycium chinense, which is mostly grown for leaves. Regardless of what, you can also eat the leaves of Lycium barbarum, but they're not very good. You want the varieties with a wide leaf instead of a skinny leaf.
Okay.
The wide leaf ones are the ones that taste better. Whatever and nurseries may have them mislabeled. There's been a lot of confusion about the names, but the ones with the wide leaf are the ones to eat, and you won't get poisoned eating the ones of the skinny leaves. That's maybe what's most of, they just won't taste good. So maybe that's fine. And I'm sure the wide leaf one is already there as an ornamental. I'm sure there are hedges of it around in the cities. It's been grown in Europe for a very, very long time. A matrimony vine, they call it in England. It also does make a fruit, but it's fairly bitter. I don't think the fruit of it's very good myself.
I have a question about this that you've already touched upon, the toxicity and these questions. People ask us sometimes, and do you know if there is I've looked through scientific papers, I've spent lots of time in the online places looking species by species. Do you know, is there one, I'm looking for two things. One source that has toxicity, either listed, either a plant list of, be careful with these, or more specific information about the species, but also a list of the things that we should not be, the specific compounds that we should be worried about, apart from oxalic acid.
I have the perfect book. Let's see, where do I have it here? This will just take a moment. Sorry, I'm turning my back on you over there.
That's anything for a good reference.
It's a very good one. It's by Ben Eric Van Wyck, and it's not jumping out at me. He has a bunch of great books. He's in South Africa. He has a bunch of great books, and I believe it's called, here it is. It's Mind-Altering and Poisonous Plants of the World.
Oh, we're going to get in trouble when we order that.
And it lists it goes through about 300 of the most poisonous species, but then it also has tables in the back of over 1,000, and it talks about the specific compounds and their chemistry and how to treat people who've been poisoned with them.
No, we're not going to do that. We're not going that far.
I haven't used it for that either, but I found it very useful for, I think it's the best thing I've seen. Most of the poison plant books are for livestock. But this one is really oriented towards.
And more of them are all for wilder plants. And so if we're looking at the potential toxicity of some of the more perennial. The other thing I had a question about, I keep forgetting my question. It's late in the day.
Sure.
Is anti-nutrients, which is not the same. Can you say something about anti-nutrients?
Sure. Like oxalic acid, for example.
For example.
Sure, there are some compounds in plants that actually make us, like oxalic acid, for example, makes you less able to take calcium from your other foods. That's maybe one of the reasons I'm not very excited about Good King Henry, because it's one of those that has anti-nutrients in it. Excuse me. The other, and there are a few others of those. The other category is there are some plants that are normally fine to eat, but that when there's chemical fertilizer around, they can take up extra nitrates, which can become toxic at that point. And that family, the chenopod family, which includes spinach, beets, have that tendency. Amaranth, saltbush. So that would be like Atriplex, Beta vulgaris, and the amaranths. Oh, now that's been combined with the amaranths, both of them have that trait. So there are, it's important to be sure about the edibility of new plants when we try them, but also I think sometimes we overlook the toxicities in the plants we already grow and eat as well. Yeah, or like
right, and so my concern here is, we have a whole group of new plants here that have a lot of wonderful characteristics. But we want to make sure that we give people the correct information. And I think yes. One of the things that we're all comfortable about saying is, oxalic acid, if you have problems with your kidneys, if you're a little kid, don't, and also don't eat too much of anything. Dietary diversity is a good thing. You can base your diet on anything you're going to, on one species, you're in trouble.
Yes, there are examples of vegetables that people eat, that millions of people have eaten every day for a long time, but sometimes one of them, there's a shrub in Indonesia called katuk, that again, people have eaten for thousands of years and millions of people eat it every day, but someone who wasn't from there, someone, half a world away, decided to make juice from it and drink only that every day for a month, and they died.
That's because they were an idiot.
That is because they were an idiot, yes, but idiots shouldn't die either, really.
No, I agree.
Some of us are idiots sometimes as well. So, right, it's useful to eat these things anything in moderation, and it's wise to understand the traditions of eating them, where they come from, and of course, it's best to start with things that are native to where you live, where it's most. First of all, because they're already there, they're native, but also because it can be easier to learn those traditions of sensible eating of those things where you live. And you all have some wonderful native perennial vegetables there that should be in every garden to begin with, I would imagine.
We have one more question here.
Yeah, I just wanted to hear if you knew about this website or database, Plans for the Future, pfaf.org. How do you consider that a reliable source to?
I do. I think it's very reliable, and one of the reasons is that, besides that I've confirmed what it says in many other places, is that it does provide references for every single piece of data that's in it.
Yeah.
So you can go and it'll say this is edible and it'll give you the reference, and then you can go and look up that reference and see what it was, and you can even go and read about it in that reference if you want before you're sure. And that's a relatively unique in these kinds of online databases, is that they paid that much attention to detail on the references, and it makes it to me a very reliable source.
Thank you. I would just, the second question would be, is there any other one around? But if you say it's unique, it's not that many of them.
Another one that's very good is a German one. It's Mansfeld's Encyclopedia of Horticultural Crops. Let's see if I can just call it up here and put a link in the chat window. There, that's excellent. That's only for things that are grown, but it lists 6,000 crops from around the world. I have the books, the hardcover books. This is them right behind me here. That's the 6 volume set. It's so good. The books are the best. It's very, 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 very. I've bought cars for less money, I think, than this set, but they're totally worth it. But I will put here in the chat for all to see the. Oh, you can't necessarily see it in the chat, can you? But anyway, here goes. Oops, no, that's wrong. Sorry. The way the database works is you have to enter the Latin name, and then you get the the listing. You can't just read through it, in other words.
Can you share your screen, please?
Oh, that would be
better.
yes, and I will also send it to the meeting group chat. Here you go, and I will share the screen. The other ones I know of are mostly tropical. So for temperate climates, this is going to be the one to use is the Mansfeld database, Mansfeld's World Database of Agriculture and Horticultural Crops. It's incredible. It's so good. So you can look up, let's see, we might go to Buenos Orientalis. Let's see if I can get, oh, come on, I know it's in there. Let's try again. Now it's going to behave. There we go. So you can see it lists 3 species. We want to see Buenos Orientalis. It has names in different languages, English, French, German, and Russian in this case. It has other Latin names. Said to be cultivated in former times in Europe, formerly in Western Europe, recommended for cultivation as a salad plant. Here's where it grows wild. And then it gives us 2 references for that. So I think this is really one of the very best places. This and Plants for a Future. And I would say this one is even more, this is sort of an official distinguished, academic institute, and Plants for a Future is kind of a bunch of wild and crazy permaculture people who did truly excellent, spectacular work. But I really quite like this, especially because it's only species which are grown. So you're filtering out all of the wild edible plants and focusing in on the things that are cultivated on purpose. So I think that's a really useful useful tool. It takes a little while to figure out how to use the database, but I think it is very, very much worth looking species up there to see more details. It includes all the the things grown, grasses that are grown to feed cows anywhere in the world, and anything grown as a living fence, and anything planted for timber, and anything grown as a vegetable, and it's the whole planet. So it's quite a beast. But if you put the specific, if you put the Latin name in, it'll give you the one that you're looking for. If it's present, if they knew at the time that it was grown as a vegetable, it will be in there.
Vet någon det latinska namn för kärleksört?
Telekia är det väl? Eller? Telefium, det hette seden förut.
Ja, det har jag ändrat.
Ja, telefium.
Jag frågar honom, jag kan inte uttala hur det är att äta den regelbundet.
How is it to eat? You said telefium? Va? Telefium regularly, every day, on everyday basis. Is that good?
Yeah. Oh, it's-
Called sedum a couple of years ago. Telefium. Telefium.
oh, I don't like that one very much. But many people really do. So flavor is very individual, but I don't care for it. I went through about a decade where I wanted to grow as many perennial vegetables as I could find from around the world. And then I learned which ones would actually grow and that also tasted good. And now I've just moved 2 years ago and I only brought about a dozen with me. So I'm still trying new ones here.
It's not interesting if you like it, but what if you like it and you eat it
What
regularly?
is it like? Oh, slimy and sort of. I didn't like the flavor or the texture.
Any poisonous ingredients in that you're familiar with?
Not that I know of, but I mean, there is a long tradition of eating it in Europe, so I would assume that it is my ignorance, not the plant's fault in any way.
Okay.
I guess we
Yes,
can
sir.
add them. Look at the moderate.
Well, thank you so much, Eric. Now the time is up.